The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, we start the show with the biggest news of the day. An 8-year contract extension for Lane Hutson with an AAV at $8.85 million. Also, just gonna peel back the curtain here. We recorded an entire podcast well before the news dropped, so this will be inserted right at the front. We could not release a show today without mentioning Lane Hutson. CJ, how did we get here?
Well, look, it's a massive deal for the Canadiens, I think, to get this player locked up to end what we've already described as, at times an emotional negotiation, one that, had to be put back on the rails a couple times. And I think ultimately how we get here on Thanksgiving Monday up here north of the border with Lane Hutson getting lots of turkey. It's really because the player himself wanted to get a deal done. The Canadiens held pretty firm in their negotiations. They stretched to where they felt was sort of their ceiling with these talks. They had a prior offer on the table that was roughly $8 million 8 years and $9 million, although there was some deferred money in that when that was still allowed. Basically ends up with the same type of deal now in terms of present value of money. And, for Hutson, it's, he just signed away his 30s, but he's getting a lot of guaranteed dollars for someone who's just played one full season in the league. It was a special season culminating with the Calder Trophy last year. But, I think that the Canadiens have really done a nice job, Julian, if you step back and look at the way they've built kind of an internal cap structure. You're going all the way back to the Nick Suzuki deal, but Slafkovsky, Gooley, I know they paid a little bit more for Dobson, obviously, because he was basically an unrestricted free agent 1 year of RFA when he signed his big deal and they made the trade last summer. But, they've assembled a pretty nice core here and they've managed to keep the dollars relatively intact and over a long term. And that could age beautifully for them if these players all meet or exceed their potential.
Even with that internal structure that the Canadiens have, how surprised are you at the AAV coming in below 9? Some people wondered if Lane Hutson's next contract would have double digits on the annual average value.
Well, I'll say this. This is a reminder that these things are not we can all calculate from afar what someone should be paid, comparing players and this and that. But there is actually a human element to this. And I believe for Lane Hutson to have gotten something like that kind of deal, he was going to have to play this out, meaning playing out this season without this contract. And so he would have done that knowing in the back of his mind, he could have got $70 million guaranteed that he had passed up. And then obviously he was going to have to perform. And then quite honestly, he was probably going to have a difficult negotiation at this time next year, potentially missing time at camp or the season to get the Canadiens much higher than this. And all those things would have been fair. I don't begrudge any player who does that, but look at the deal that Luke Hughes signed in New Jersey. He gets that after missing all of camp or a big chunk of camp. It's not easy as a restricted free agent, especially one in Hutson's case where he can't even wasn't eligible for an offer sheet. So he didn't have a whole lot of leverage here other than the fact he's a great talent. So, but for him to get basically this long-term security and commitment, he was going to have to sacrifice potentially a little bit of earning power to do it. And, that's where we wind up here. I don't think that this player wanted to be a distraction this year. It got pretty loud here the last few days, right? There's been a lot of talk in the market, even out externally, about what this deal might look like, the way negotiations were going. Definitely, there was some high emotion there. But I think at the end of the day, Lane Hutson is comfortable that maybe he doesn't max out what he could have earned here, but he's got a lot of security. By doing it now too, Julian, he gets $55 million in signing bonuses, including, a big payment next summer. $11 million payment right out of the gate. So, there's a lot of reason to get it done, to get, those kind of paydays in his bank account. And quite honestly, now he just gets to play. And he's playing for a pretty exciting team and one that he's obviously a huge part of.
Yeah, he gets to feel some relief after all of that noise from the summer. It's a little bit difficult for us to tell now, but I wonder how that contract will age considering the cap going up and where some of these other comparables are at too in terms of defensemen who also got paid in recent days.
For sure. And, we should note too, Lane Hutson has 5 restricted free agent years out of the 8 he signed away here. So those years by definition tend to be cheaper. That's basically in simple terms, the way the CBA is set up is you get a value on your players in the early days, and then they maximize their leverage, and they maybe pull one over the team as they get older, right? They have the ability to walk and go play anywhere else that would sign them for more. So he didn't give up. It's not a direct apples to apples. Like even if you look at the Jackson Lacombe deal in Anaheim, Lacombe's 24. He was much closer to being UFA. So it's a different kind of contract. And really when you're in Lane's situation, you have to, if you're going to get that 8-year security, you're going to have to give up a little bit, I think. And who knows how much he did give up here. I mean, it's still as talented a player as he is, as we know with development curves, like he could, maybe he takes a step back this year in the short term. That could have hurt him if he waited. I mean, this is all the things that player's family, the player himself, his agents are kind of weighing, I guess, when you're making this decision. But the truth is if you have $70-odd million on the table, it's hard to pass that up. It really is. And I do think that this will be a huge weight off for Lane Hutson. And I know it is for the Canadiens front office. I mean, we know what optimism is kind of surrounding the start of that season there. And this just removes a cloud, a storyline that would have kept coming up. And it does so as they come home to play their home opener, right? They started the season on the road. I think it's going to be pretty electric vibes as the Canadiens kick off their home campaign with this big piece of business done.
Anything else you want to mention about Lane or anything to do with the core they've assembled now? You look at the back end where Noah Dobson Noah Dobson getting added to the core this summer. Mike Matheson's still there. Caden Gooley. They've got some good pieces on defense.
They do. And when I look at their overall salary structure in terms of this environment where the cap's going to be surging, they've left lots of money to spend on a future addition or additions plural. I still think that they're positioned pretty well if they're able to make an impact trade or a free agent signing at some point in the near future. Because obviously, that's probably the next piece to fall in place. But, in terms of what they've done, there's no guarantee all these players hit. But if they do, they've kept everyone at a pretty reasonable number, and they've gone the long-term route, right? Like this is a little bit what you're seeing Florida do. Now, Florida's done it with players who've won 2 cups in a lot of cases, but you see them signing a lot of max term extensions, even with guys like Nico Mikkola, like not necessarily the frontline players on their team, but they're kind of have a cost certainty fixed in with players that they like. I think the Canadiens are sort of following a similar model. I'm not saying they're copying Florida by any means. I mean, we've seen, the Sabres sign young players to 8-year deals. We saw the Senators do it with guys before maybe they've fully established themselves, but you're betting on the potential because you love what you saw in those early years. I mean, I think the same strategy is at play, and, the CBA is changing. And so if they didn't do this deal now, that's the other side of this. If Lane Hutson waited till next summer or even next fall, if it bled into training camp, I mean, he would only be eligible for a 7-year deal. He's gotten the 8th year in this case. There's change to the way the signing bonus money works. You got $55 million in this contract in signing bonus payments. It would have been somewhere in the 40s, if they had waited for the new rules to take effect. So there was benefit too for both sides to get it done now because, they're getting kind of some of the legacy CBA elements. They're using them to their advantage that have been taken out in this extension that's going to kick in formally next September. So, it's an interesting time for big contracts around the league. And obviously that's been a huge storyline, I feel like, from our last 3, 4, 5 shows because you keep seeing all these big deals being signed. But I don't see this as anything but a home run, probably for the Canadiens, quite honestly. But how can you argue against it for Lane Hutson, who has lifetime security now for him and his family? And again, he doesn't have to worry about any, business over sort of shadowing what he's got to focus on to become, the impact player he certainly promises to be.
8 years, $70.8 million, the contract extension signed by Lane Hutson with the Montreal Canadiens. Great work, CJ. What just wild money indeed. And with that, we continue with the rest of today's Chris Johnston show.
CJ, we spent last week breaking down Connor McDavid signing his extension, Jack Eichel signing an extension days before then, Kirill Kaprizov gets himself paid, and we lamented the drop in quality for the 2026 free agent class. That being said, still some really interesting contract situations out there. What are you hearing on guys like Adrian Kempe in LA or Marty Necas in Colorado? Alex Tuck is another player in Buffalo who could use a new deal as well. What are you hearing about some of the other guys lower down the list?
Well, really, it's my expectation that some of those guys are going to sign too. So, I mean, the trend might have started, right? And you go back to this offseason, call it a month ago, we might have been talking about, oh, look at the possibility for all this craziness. And, this really unique 2026 summer. And if anything, it's going the other direction. Kempe and the Kings for sure have had a lot of discussions, and I think they've been described to me kind of as productive discussions. They don't necessarily see the world the same way. If they did, they'd probably have a contract signed at this point. But I think you have a situation there where the Kings are losing, Anze Kopitar after the season. They're still in their competitive window. They're trying to take steps forward as an organization. And so I think letting go someone who's scored goals at the rate that Kempe has the last number of seasons for them, kind of a unique player. He kills penalties, scores goals at a pretty high rate. He's actually pretty physical. If you look at his hit stats for an offensive player, I think it's really for them getting to some kind of number that both sides can get to, but with so much time before the summer, like, I guess any negotiation can break down, but it just feels like we're going to end up with another player signing there. And so, I think that the relevant contracts from, his side of things is, he liked William Nylander's $11.5 million extension that he did a few years ago in Toronto. Then Kyle Connor does the $12 million deal that he got in Winnipeg. Kempe's numbers don't quite reach the platform numbers those players had in terms of goals, but he's certainly in the range. So, if that contract gets done, it's going to be a big one. I suppose Natchez is maybe where the most intrigue might be found. Just because, he arrived in Denver last year, obviously as part of that Mikko and Rantanen trade. And, so he doesn't have the same length of history with the team, which doesn't mean he doesn't want to stay. I'm not saying that at all, but I think that, it can be a little different sort of negotiation. And he's also comfortable letting it play out a little bit more, so his agent and the Avalanche, well, they've certainly kind of set the table for how talks might go. Like, it doesn't seem like it's as active of a conversation that's happening around him. And, very, very, very early days of the season, but, he's put up some points to start the year. And, if he has, a season where, he's getting to 80, 90 points, I think he was low 80s last season between the two teams, but if he's pushing, even higher in terms of his production, maybe it doesn't suit his interest to sign. I mean, maybe he looks at the board around him emptying and considers, hey, this is a good time to absolutely maximize my earnings. So, it's not meant to be a prediction, but I could see where the terms of that situation, especially if Natchez has, really a good season. I mean, if you're him, it's going to take a lot of money to give up the chance to maybe be a free agent. As for Tuck, Buffalo's its own special case, as you know, but, he is a Western New York guy, has expressed a pretty strong desire to stay there. And yeah, I think he's going to do that, but the Sabres, I don't know what you want to say about the Sabres. It's a tough situation, but I have to think that they're going to be of a mind to keep good players rather than letting one walk away.
I wanted to, at some point in the show, get to just like a little bit of a wraparound around the first week of the season and mention a couple different teams like the Buffalo Sabres. I know they've only played 2 games. Depending on when this episode comes out, they'll be in the middle of their 3rd game. They're at home against Colorado. And hey, they could win that game. Who knows? You never, and any given team could win on any given day. But just considering how that first week kind of went for them, it's hard not to feel bad. Same old Sabres type deal. Seeing Josh Norris get hurt and he's going to be out for a significant amount of time. Like, a season is not made in a week, but it looks like a tough start already. At least from what I've seen online, Sabres fans are feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's fair or not, the current team is saddled by the previous 14 years, right? Like, the way people view what happens, and this can go in a positive standpoint, though. I mean, if they get on a run at some point this year, if they get in a playoff run, like, people will be a emotion, I'm sure, in the fan base will swing in a positive direction because it's been so long since they felt those things. So, there will be a time in Buffalo where it's almost, it does come around for them. But when you lose 2 games, you scored 1 goal in those 2 games, opening night at home, one-sided loss, like all those things, then you see the videos streaming online of, frustrated Sabres fans
You think of the same one I saw too, right?
Yeah.
The group of fans.
I saw it actually almost right after the game. Someone posted that in almost real time. And, part of me wants to say tap the brakes, guys. I get it. And it sucks. You paid that money. You went to the game. Wasn't very entertaining. Your team has kicked you in the groin for, a decade and a half. I do I'm sympathetic. It's hard to say calm down in a place where literally they have the longest active playoff drought rather by a wide margin. But I can't overreact yet. In fact, I know we did our prediction show, but if I did have a hot take, I still think the Sabres can make the playoffs this year.
What?
Buddy, there's 80 games left. You're not.
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. What? You think the Sabres are going to make the playoffs?
I think they can make the playoffs. It's a little different than they will make the playoffs, but
okay. All right.
But we'll have to see.
It. I like the heat.
Yeah.
I like the heat. I just didn't expect it.
But I do get it. Look, most teams can lose 2 games out of the gate that are pretty good. The Lightning have lost 2 games to start the season, just to name another team.
Yes, they did.
I don't think anyone in Tampa is losing their minds. I don't think that team's answering hard questions from the media. There's no fan video of, riots at hat tricks or whatever. The point is now the Lightning have earned a little bit more patience, I think, from their fans because of how competitive they've been for so long. But, I'm not ignoring that Buffalo's kind of in one if they don't turn it quickly, because it can probably snowball in the wrong direction. But, 2 games, man. 2 games.
We
talking about practice, Julian. We talking about practice. This isn't the real thing.
Not the real thing.
This is two practice games. Come on.
Not a whole season that you go out there and die for. We're talking about 2 games. Here's the thing. I apologize. I apologize for the laughter. I was just shocked that CJ came out with the take. I don't want to make it seem as if I'm laughing at Sabres fans, because I genuinely feel bad for them. That is a franchise. That is an organization. That is a fan base. I think of all the teams in the league, I think there are a lot of people around the league who want to see them be happy and want to see them be successful, because that is as passionate of a fan base as you will see in the National Hockey League. And they deserve better. They deserve so much better than the crap they've gotten for the last near 15 years with that. And they have good players.
It's perplexing because the Bills have gotten it so right.
Yeah.
Under the same ownership, you know what I mean? And, the Bills had a lot of years sort of lost in the wilderness, and now they've had a number of years where they've been a contender. And getting Josh Allen has helped that clearly. Getting a superstar player, maybe that's the difference, frankly, is Buffalo's drafted first overall and have some really, really good players, but I don't know if we call them superstars. I mean, Jack Eichel, though, who they got number 2, is pretty close. We've been over the same. I don't even know. I don't have an answer. I mean, clearly it's a failing on many levels that to get to where they've sort of slipped as an organization. I know it's something the NHL isn't too happy about. It legit one of the great buildings in the state to go to games at, and I'm sure it will be again. This will not last forever, but let's just hope they score a few goals and get a few wins. I'm not cheering for them in any game. I just mean in general.
No.
We don't need them starting 0-5 because the takes will be fire if that's what happens.
I mean, remember too, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is injured as well. They've had to play Alex Lyon.
Well, they got 6 goalies. It feels like. I mean, they signed Georgiev and sent him down. Right? They made a claim on Colton Ellis. Obviously, they got Devin Levi still. It just, yeah, it doesn't scream stability. None of it.
But again, we're not rooting for, and we don't root for any team in our respective careers. But if the Buffalo Sabres found a way to turn this around, I think you'd have a lot of people around the league who'd be like, finally, Finally, it happened.
Sure. I mean, anyway, it was nowhere near on the same level, but even seeing like the Senators and Canadiens turn it around last year and both like get in the playoffs and, because it's been a while for those teams, it's been way less time than it had been for Sabres fans. But, I think that's usually the feeling. Even, I suppose, in some cases, rivalries might be so hot that you actually hate the other team. But for the most part, you can appreciate as a fan. I went to my first baseball playoff game in 10 years last weekend, right? Like you saw the way I was buzzing on that episode. I'm just saying, like when you wait that long, you do appreciate it a little bit more when you get back to those times. But anyway, I'm just saying it's too early to write off the Sabres, even though I get it. I get why it's hard to defend their performance through 2 games as well.
It's too early to write off anyone. It's too early to crown anyone through the first week of the season. Also, by the way,
Pavel Dorofeyev Hart Trophy. We didn't
even mention him. The fact that he got that hat trick.
He's got 5 goals already.
Yeah, it's amazing. One quick thing. I know CJ mentioned the Jays just now. If you stick around for the episode long enough, we'll have a JFR, a Jays fan reaction from CJ. We'll figure out how to make that work. But yeah, that leads me to the next question. Just any other impressions around the league through the first week of the year? Pavel Dorofeyev could easily come up with that with the Vegas Golden Knights. But anyone else catching your eye?
Well, we probably owe the Bruins an apology. First thing that comes to my mind.
That's a team that started pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's they managed to win their first 3 games. If you listen to our prediction show, we had them 8th in the Atlantic. Still early, I guess, for that prediction to end up being true, but they've had a nice start. Seattle, we owe them an apology.
Do.
It's hard. It really is hard though, like to draw many conclusions, positive or negative. I mean, I was actually thinking about this before the red light went on and we started recording. Like, how many weeks do we give it before we draw any conclusions? Like, is it 2 weeks? Is it 3 weeks? Is it 4?
Is it American Thanksgiving?
Well, that tends to be like a thing GMs have often said. I feel like GMs sometimes are like buying themselves time with that. Because it's a nice way not to be like pressured into action, right? Early in the year, if something isn't working with your roster. We've seen coaches fired way before US Thanksgiving though. And to me, when coaches start being fired, that's when we can start drawing conclusions, because obviously those teams are like, this is getting too far out of hand. I think of Edmonton a couple seasons ago. I think it was about 12 games into the year that Jay Woodcroft got fired. Chris Knobloch replaced him. Obviously, they've been to 2 straight cup finals since that time. But yeah, it's probably at least 10 to 15 games before we feel like it, we could start really saying, wow, this team's got to turn it around, or this team's maybe a little better than we thought. So, my early impressions are it's nice to have hockey back, except for last Friday when there were no games on the schedule.
How do you feel about the fact that they had that like random Friday where there were no games, and then Saturday everyone plays, and then you have 1 game on the Sunday?
I'm totally fine with it. I can't believe how many people were freaked out by it. Like, my timeline was full of people like raging, and anyway. They had every
but where do you stand on that? Because like I don't know where to fall on that, because part of me feels like, yeah, I don't like the idea that like there's a whole night off where there's no games, but there's also a world where like they have like 3 games on a Friday, and if they put a marquee matchup, the first thing everyone's going to say is, why did they put this matchup on a Friday? Like, I don't know if you win with the schedule is what I'm saying.
You can't, because the schedule it's a league schedule, but each team is responsible for providing the dates the team plays, right? And so the reason we get some wonky things early in the year is a lot of US markets do not want games on certain days. They especially don't want games on NFL Sundays. And so hence 1 game on Sunday this weekend. Every team played on Saturday. Most teams don't want to play too many back-to-backs. So, obviously this year with a more condensed schedule due to the Olympic break, there's going to be more back-to-backs around the league. And I know like the Rangers have already played 4 games to start the season. We're not even a full week in yet, but I think there's just so much more that goes into it that it's hard for me to get that fired up by it. It was weird because I will say I woke up Friday morning not realizing there were no games. I go to the app to be like, oh, what do we got today? And it's like, what? Nothing? Really? But I watched a playoff baseball game instead that night. I've still scratched the sporting itch. And then we had a full Sunday with afternoon games right through to late night. So I don't know. I can't get too fired up by it, but I'm the only one, it seems. Like producer Drew was raging in the chat. Many others online.
Yeah. Producer Donkey Face was too. Like, it just was like not. I don't know, man. I feel like, particularly with
would
scheduling,
you rather let teams play, like force teams to play when they're not going to sell tickets, though?
Well, you want them to be in the best position possible. Also, like this whole thing where like, oh, well, we got to account for NFL Sunday. Oh, we got to account for NBA starting up, or we got to account for MLB playoffs. Like, damn it! Like
that's real though.
No. I don't disagree with that. My point is just like, I wish the NHL was just at a point where they could just be like, damn it, we're the NHL and we're just going to play these games on Tuesday and the product is what it is. It's not, but I just wish it was at that point, because there's just it feels like at almost every point in the year, it's like you have to account for this, you have to account for that, you have to account for college football playoffs, you have to account for the college football regular season, you have to account for the freaking.
Here's the thing: it's not even just the NHL broadly.
World Golf Tournament.
It's the individual owners that don't want to do it, right?
Right.
Like they're all in their own way. They're all their own individual businesses. If you own the Dallas Stars, for example, like there's just no way it would make sense to schedule a Stars game against a Cowboys game. Like,
no,
you know, it was weird, and I'm certainly not blaming anyone for this, but like as I discussed on the last game, like when I was at that Leafs home opener against the Canadiens and the Jays were playing a clinching baseball game, like it didn't actually lend itself to the best environment for Leafs. Like that one, what are you going to do? But it makes sense that they switched their game on Monday, today, because you don't want half the fans that are even in the building, like watching another game instead of your game. So I'm a little more sympathetic to it as what I'm getting to. You know, I don't know if you saw, there's an interesting interview. Hasso Plattner, who's the Sharks owner, hadn't spoken 10 years to the local media, and he dropped into San Jose last week. And he had some interesting thoughts on all kinds of things that have happened for the Sharks over that decade. But one of the things he said is he's like, we don't sell tickets on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He's like, we can't get people in the building that night. So every owner is looking at his or her situation. And so it's not like Gary Bettman's like, we can't go head to head with the NFL. It's like the people that run each of his franchises kind of conclude that in their own market or not. Excuse me. I think it's why team actually, like the Leafs, every year plays a lot of October home games, because the Leafs, I don't think, have to often think in that manner. And they just like, yeah, sure, just schedule us whenever. Because obviously they share the building also with the Raptors during the season, but the Raptors they're playing preseason games now, but the NBA regular season isn't going. So anyway, scheduling is like, it's literally a team's full-time job at the NHL head office. And I think it's like one of those thankless jobs in a lot of ways. No one's ever happy. So I'm not raging at the schedule anyway.
Moving from the schedule to Hasso Plattner, who we just mentioned earlier, he did have some very interesting things to say. The San Jose Sharks owner, also hat tip to Sheng Peng, who his article on him, that's lighting the San Jose hockey world on fire right now. His work with San Jose Hockey Now, going in on Thomas Hertl and his situation when he was asking out to go contend for a team, for a cup, I should say. Erik Karlsson, not necessarily the most flattering comments about him. Some other stuff coming up from that interview. Anything else kind of boggling your mind a little bit? I was surprised at how honest he was.
I mean, runs one of the biggest companies in the world, billionaire man. I think he's 83. He's just very direct in how he speaks generally, German guy. I can't quite put myself in his shoes but I can imagine he doesn't really answer to anybody. He's the boss. It makes me wish he spoke more than once every 10 years, because he really had very honest and candid assessments of how they kind of got to this spot. It also reminded me, like, this is, you sure you want to rebuild? Like the guy hasn't been able to speak for 10 years. Like he actually said, it doesn't make much sense for me to speak to you reporters when all we're doing is sinking, I think was the term he used. And the Sharks still aren't there, right? Like talk about a couple tough opening games to the season. They blew a lead to Vegas. Lost a 7-6 game the other night. Like it could just be another long year in San Jose. Well, we love Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, like they've got some real prospects there. It just might still be a while before they're back to being competitive. Although Hasselplattner said he expects them to challenge for the playoffs next season. So, he talked about kind of how the end of the last era played out, the sort of Joe Thornton era where he felt that, his GM, Doug Wilson, who, was very highly regarded GM for a long time, helped build that team that, year in and year out for a decade or more, had a chance to win a Stanley Cup, got to the final and lost to Pittsburgh, but how he kind of abandoned some of his own principles and signed players for too long and, made what I might call, this wasn't exactly Hassel's words, but desperate moves to try to extend the window, which I think he was lumping the Erik Karlsson into. It's great. I think it's great to hear an owner talk like that, though. Like if I was a fan of that team, I'd feel good knowing, just sort of seeing that the owner's been paying close attention and that he cares and that he's, that he's kind of pissed off about it too. Like that was kind of between the lines, a lot of what he was talking about. Like he's not happy with some of the things that went on. I don't think that's bad for business, or I don't think that's bad for your fans. Just get in front of the mics a little more often, Hasso. Give us the content.
The fact that he just went out and just said, hey, man, like, we really shouldn't have let Joe Pavelski go. And yeah, maybe the draft picks that ultimately turned into, Tim Stützle and Josh Norris being in that deal that gets us Erik Karlsson. I wish we didn't do that. Just for me, the fact that he went to those specifics, that I was like, oh shit, like this is honest.
Yeah.
From Hasselplattner.
And he's not, even though he's not present because he hasn't spoken in 10 years, he's not an absentee owner. He's paying attention, right? Like that's what it tells me is that he's really looking at the granular business and the decisions and the like why they were made. Like he's thinking very critically about what they've been doing. You can tell with the way he answered the questions. And you wouldn't know that if you don't hear from him, you might just think, oh, he's just sitting on his pile of money. Like Donald, what was DuckTales anyway? I think when they
Scrooge Duck.
I don't know. I'm not calling him Scrooge. I just mean he's just over there in Germany, like counting his money and not really caring about the Sharks because they're not that. The toy is not
Scrooge McDuck. Scrooge McDuck.
Right,
sorry, not Scrooge Duck. Scrooge McDuck.
The toy is not that interesting or shiny right now. But no, like clearly he's been paying attention. He cares, and yeah. I mean, this is the life cycle of teams. It's like it's kind of scary because the Sharks are still, as I say, they're still probably a ways away. And things are going well for them. Like they got a first overall pick in a year that Celebrini was there. And like, it seems like he's a player worth getting excited about based on the very limited, year and a little bit we've seen him in the NHL, but it's kind of painful. I don't love the system. I gotta say, like Buffalo, we talked about Buffalo earlier. Like when you tear it down to the very wood, it can be a long rebuild.
You've made it very clear on this podcast. You are not, I don't want to go out and full on say anti-rebuild, but you do not like the idea of tearing it all down and trying to build it back up. And to your point, with rebuilds, you never know how long they're supposed to last. They could be 2 years, they could be 3 years, they could be 13 years.
Yeah. And look, you get to a point where you do have to make hard decisions and move on from players and get younger and accept you're going to take a step back in the short term. But I just think the full on trade everything that isn't nailed down approach, like it often is like kind of a disaster unless things kind of, I think you need good players that are between like 23 and 25 while you're also getting the 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds into your lineup. And if you don't have that, usually the players that are like 30 that are the good veterans, and I realize you have those players around because you want sort of to instill good habits and try to create a culture. But usually those players just aren't good enough to actually make that much of a difference on the ice. The 18 and 19-year-olds, even as talented as they are, aren't usually good enough to make you a winner right away. And you kind of get caught in these weird games. And then, Buffalo deserves its own forensics at some point because they've had players who just consistently go and are key members of a top six that wins a cup. And it's happened time and time again. And there was once a time they were all in the Sabres lineup at the same time. I'm thinking
ridiculous.
Of, obviously O'Reilly, Sam Reinhart, Eichel, like they were all on the team at the same time. So how did that not yield to better things? Anyway, we don't have time to open that can of worms.
Well, I think a future episode we should do is we should delve more into your philosophy of, if you were a GM, how would you run your team? I think that'd be very fascinating, considering the experience you've accumulated covering the sport and your work as an insider. So maybe we should table that as a future episode idea.
Thank you. The easiest thing you can say is, here's my plan. We're going to trade everybody. Because for a while that sounds like a plan, right? For a while that is a plan, and you make trades and you get a bunch of picks, and people, they're like, yeah, I believe in this. But it's just converting those picks and maybe young prospects, and like, it's turning that over. That's why, I think what Montreal did was pretty interesting. And I realized they did have one number one pick in this cycle, but they didn't go like full scale crazy, everything must go. They held on to some players, right? Like they didn't fall for like 5 straight years to the bottom of the league. I think, that team was in the cup final, the kind of goofy one in 21. And they were,
the bottom fell out after.
Yeah, but they were back in the playoffs by 2025. So like that is like best case scenario for a turnaround. I'm not saying they're necessarily the best position, although they might be the best position to turn it now into like a long 10 or 15 year run where they're knocking on the door every year. But it's if you get 10 years in and you don't have anything to show for it, like that's hard on business in most markets. Let's just call it what it is. Most fan bases won't tolerate sucking for 10 years.
No, nor should they. Before we get to Ask CJ, very quick Leafs corner. Easton Cowan set to make his NHL debut for the Toronto Maple Leafs on Monday. Your thoughts on the debut to come? Obviously, by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be ahead of the game. We were not able to go into the future with that, but what do you think of the potential impact he could have on the franchise?
It's tough to say. And just because he's a young player, and I know he had 2 great seasons in London since the Leafs drafted him and has played big games there, like nothing to prove, certainly as a junior player. But, how his professional career is going to start is really anyone's guess. I think the Leafs themselves aren't totally sure. I mean, he did his job in training camp. He earned a job, and it would have been very easy for them to send him down and keep him down with the Marlies to start. But they didn't do that because of how he played. I think if you're running kind of a meritocracy, he merited a spot among their NHL forwards. But, he sat the first 2 games. Now he's starting on a line with Matthew Nyes and Austin Matthews. That actually tells me something bigger about the Leafs than it does about Easton Cowan. It tells me they don't have it figured out yet, like what they want their lineup to look like. Like they're still really searching for it. The usual cautions apply here. There's 2 games. They won 1 and lost 1. Haven't looked tremendous yet through 2 games really for any stretch. They had a nice third period against the Canadiens in their opener, but they chased the game a lot against Detroit on Saturday. So, I feel like the coaching staff is still trying to figure out how the lines fit together. We know that Brad Treliving in the background would love at some point to add another top 6 forward, which might make the lineup fall in line a little better. But the fact that it's like the top line right wing job is like the rotating door is kind of telling. We know who used to operate in that position. We don't need to mention it for anyone listening. It probably has a good idea who I'm referencing here. But it's, it's notable that that's the spot he jumps into. But I also think, look, if you're going to play a young player, you want to give him confidence at the start of your career, at the start of his career. Like no one is expecting him to be some hero savior. I mean, he was a late 1st round pick, for a reason, and lots of players drafted there go on to have great careers. But I think we have to be reasonable with the expectations, but you're putting him on the ice with 2 good players. You're hoping that, his best attributes come out. He's a forechecker. He hounds the puck. You can see a world, you put that energy in your lineup. Like you can imagine how he's going to feel. It's his NHL debut where he can go and cause some turnovers in the offensive zone and let Matthews and Nyes and whoever else is on the ice from defensively cook and create offense. So, I still think it's a year where you're going to see Easton Cowan play games in the AHL. Like I'd be surprised if he took the job and kept an NHL position all season, but who knows? I mean, sometimes injuries and it's in his hands now, I suppose. So I'd say let's tap the caution brakes, but I don't get the sense that anyone in the fan base is getting too far ahead of themselves with this player. I mean, the problem with any Leaf or any Canadian or any Vancouver Canuck that comes up, there's a lot of focus on that player. There's a lot of people writing and doing podcasts, and like there's just a lot of talk. Like you just hear his name a lot. So you could extrapolate that like, wow, this guy's getting way too much, publicity for what he is. But I think it's a product of how much volume there is. I haven't seen anybody being like, this is the difference between the Leafs. Like he's going to come in and replace Mitch Marner. Like I haven't heard anyone in their talk go too far, but it's almost just because of the volume of talk. Braden Coots made the Canucks out of camp kind of a bit surprisingly, just because, not a top 10 pick, and he's immediately in their lineup. Like every day on the radio there and social media clips, I'm seeing people talk about him because it's interesting, right? It's a new player, but I don't think anyone's confusing him with being the difference in their season. So I guess where I land with Cowan is he plays a style that Craig Berube likes. I think he's got a lot of promise, but how ready or not he's going to be against real opponents and real games is what we got to learn next. And it starts with playing 1 and then probably playing 10. And at a certain point, Steven Lorentz got injured. So now there's a bit more flexibility in the lineup, but also you got Scott Laughton out. But at some point down the line, there's going to be some decisions if they ever get back to full health. And I do think likely he ends up with the Marlies, but who knows? Maybe he scores 2 goals in his debut and never looks back, and CJ looks like a fool. Wouldn't be the first time.
Tune in to our episode on Thursday where we break down Easton Cowan's NHL debut hat trick against the Detroit Red Wings.
And then Austin Matthews is trying to set him up for the 4th goal with an empty netter to match his start. And who knows? You never know. Sports are weird.
Is it? Sports are weird. And with that, we'll do a very quick Ask CJ. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions for our Monday episode. From Brian, what is a choice from your career you wish you would have changed?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty introspective.
It is. It's funny because like I kind of think more on the choices I made that worked out really well. Because I actually feel very lucky. Like it's not because I made such a great choice because I'm so smart. That's not what I'm getting at. But I took some gambles early in my career. One of them, I was working at the Canadian Press, working mostly in the night desk. I was a young reporter. I was getting a chance to go out and cover some NHL games, cover some golf at the time, which was actually really good for my career. Just getting the experience of covering, live tournaments, and you got to file on deadline, and going out obviously and speaking to people and, coming up with ideas and writing stories, all the stuff that you sort of take for granted when you're more of a pro. I'll call myself in air quotes, but like when it's just more a natural part of my job nowadays. But at a certain point, you have to learn all those things, right? But I quit that job and I moved over to Europe during that 04-05 lockout. I was very young. I went in and freelance stories. I went to like Sweden and talked to players who were over there having to play that season, like North American guys, and freelance some stories back. And then I went and worked in London, England, and got a job at writing news stories. And when I came back eventually to Canada a year or so later, I jumped into a higher spot at CP than when I left. And so, I look back on that decision. Like it felt very risky at the time. I gave up a full-time job in Canada. I just was kind of, I don't know, chasing a dream a little bit, and, it worked out in my favor. But if that didn't, and I never went on to the kind of career that I have, I might have looked back on it and been like, wow, I wish I didn't do that. I should have stayed where I was. I was in a good spot. It's a long way of saying I don't have a ton of regrets, because even the decisions I've made that didn't work out in the short term have still led me to where I am today. And I feel very lucky, quite honest. I mean, it's Canadian Thanksgiving. I feel very thankful for a lot of the things that have worked out for me and allowed me to do this as long as I have and to have the experiences I've had. So, I'm not ducking the question. I left Sportsnet and I went and worked for, an arm of the Toronto Star that was launching a gambling thing. I only ended up working there 2 years. I got laid off from that job, just with a financial squeeze that company was having. But first of all, I got to work and write at the Toronto Star, which was the newspaper I read as a kid, and really got, I literally am of the age that I was around the breakfast table reading the sports section, like physically as a kid, dreaming of doing this. So I got to do that. And after that, I landed at The Athletic, and that's been like a tremendous, boost for my career. So, even though that little step in the middle maybe didn't go exactly as I envisioned it, I can't can't say it was a mistake, and I don't have any ill feelings, or like, it just sort of is what it is. So anyway, I don't know where there's no advice in that, really. I guess you definitely got to keep plowing on. Like when you're met with outcomes that you don't want, or, unexpected things, you got to try to find any positive you can in that. For me, the positive, for example, of getting laid off from that other job was it gave me a chance to go and work at the Athletic. And so the positive was another door opened, I suppose, when the one closed. And it's been an awesome 2 years for me there. And I'm really sort of kind of pleased how it worked out. And it wasn't my plan. It was a larger plan, or was luck or circumstance. I don't know. Whatever you believe in led me here, and I'm happy where I am.
That's perfect, man. That's a great answer.
But yeah, I don't look back at any of the things that didn't work out and go like, wow, I wish I didn't do that. Because it's all part of your story, right?
I have one.
Good. You're going to give the people what they want. I'm giving them philosophy. You're giving them hard, cold truth.
I think this year has been pretty good for me. I think I've accomplished a lot of really cool things. I've also just tried my absolute best to manage my energy wherever I can. But I really wish I would have just got in that extra gear and found a way to force the issue, to find a way to cover Four Nations. That might end up being like the biggest regret I have. Because like I thought that tournament was not going to be a big deal. It ended up being like the biggest thing. Like, it ended up being the biggest thing we've seen in the sport in like a long time. So that's probably the one thing I would guess I would have changed. There would have been a way for me to do it. I figured there would have been a way for me to like go to like even one game or something like that if I forced the issue, but I didn't do it. So that's probably my one thing.
Fair.
It's not the biggest thing in the world, but like for one thing, it's probably that.
But I'll say this, there will be lots of events and trips and experiences still to come. So it's not like I've got to cover every event I've wanted to, but in the final analysis, I'm pretty happy with it. And so it's just fuel for your next one, man. The next time you see that kind of opportunity or something that kind of, I don't know. For me, it's like, I just try to follow my instincts. Like if something gets me excited, or like if I feel something, like, then usually there's an audience for whether that's a story, whether that's an event, whether that's whatever. And I will say I'm on record as I predicted the Four Nations would be big. I don't think I predicted it would be that big, but I knew that people were starving, and I knew the players were starving for that opportunity. Like I knew their players were going to do their part, essentially. And then obviously there was some things going on in the world with Trump and everything that I couldn't have predicted that added almost just like an extra layer. There's one thing I actually thought in the Amazon show they could have highlighted a little more. Like I liked the Four Nations clips. And there was some good access there, but like I feel like they didn't set the political climate around that, which was clearly part of it, right? I mean, Trump spoke to the U.S. players before the final game, like in the morning, and but Bill Guerin talked about it at the time. Like it was part of.
There were American guys who wanted to win for Trump.
Yes,
like it was clearly part of it.
But which is fine. Like, you can have your opinion. But like my point is, they were allowed to feel that way. But I don't know why they didn't. I guess maybe they just wanted to be a little more safe. But I felt like the show swung and missed on that element.
They absolutely did. They completely missed on that. Like, there's no way you can go through that tournament and go through all that footage and not include such an important piece of context for why the tournament. I won't say it was every single thing, but it was a significant part of why the tournament exploded the way that it did.
Right.
They missed on that.
And there's no way with their cameras everywhere that there wasn't more said privately, given what was said publicly. There's no way there wasn't more said privately about it, or like, I don't know, a poster on a wall or a sign, or like, there's no way there wasn't more going on behind the scenes, and they had access to it and we didn't get to see that anyway.
Exactly. Anyway,
which I'm actually fine with. And this isn't a political thing. Like, I'm just saying everyone's allowed to feel a certain way. That's part of the fact they felt that way is part of what made the tournament. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
The fact that players felt a certain way and the Canadiens might have felt a certain way. Like, like I'm not here to say what's right and wrong. I'm here to say that's part of what elevated the tournament to just a little bit more than a casual hockey exhibition.
That needed to be included.
It was needed to think about it. It was actually a hockey exhibition. It was whatever it was, 5 games total played in February. that nobody really got paid for. I know there was like a small thing to basically cover some expenses, but like it was an exhibition, but it meant more because there was more going on, and it was just kind of glossed over in that episode, or the couple episodes that covered it.
Exactly. Let's get to another question here. This one's more of a suggestion from EJ. What about an award for the player who gets the most assists in a season? Call it the Gretzky Award. Been asking and saying this for years.
The Kucherov?
Ooh.
I mean, I guess I don't hate it because, I mean, we do carve out goal scoring with the Rocket Richard Trophy. So I guess my only initial thought is the player that finishes with the most assists most often wins the Art Rouse Trophy is the highest scoring player in the league. So, you know, you
kind of have that.
You're still honoring that player, but if you want to add more awards, that could be one. I mean, I've always heard, you know, offensive defenseman award, you know, to sort of, you know, give the Norris a different focus or maybe even do a defensive defenseman award and then have the Norris be more for, you know, Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes style player.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up for it. Awards don't get me that fired up though.
Awards don't get you that fired up?
No, like they don't. They just like, I feel like adding more. I'm not sure we need more. I'm not saying we should take any away per se either. It just, I feel like you risk watering down the effect of the individual trophies if there's too many individual trophies.
Okay. I understand where you're getting at with that. I'll say though, I'm very much on board with the defensive defenseman one. I don't know if we need like 5 or 6 other ones. If you start like fragmenting all of them, to your point, like you're right, you dilute the quality.
But do you need 2 goalie awards then? Like,
I think we're at a point where like the Vezina Trophy, we understand that to be the ultimate goalie award that's out there. I don't see anyone hyping up the
best backup
the Jennings.
You know what I mean? Or like, I don't
know. And I don't see people hyping up the Jennings Trophy as much either.
No,
like it's the Vezina or anything else.
Right.
Fair. One last one for you here from Sens Vader. What's the latest on Yegor Chinnikov?
The latest is he asked for a trade in the summer. He was scratched for the first game of the season. They're going to try to make it work, but you know, it may not be possible. We'll just have to see. I mean, I think that they certainly have tried to clear the air there with the coach. Like it seemed like a lot of the issue with the initial trade request was kind of a feeling of disconnect with Dean Evison and not understanding his place in the organization. But you know, the Blue Jackets have a pretty good forward group. So he's got to kind of work his way into the lineup. He still has to find a spot. And if not, I imagine that trade request could be revisited in the future. But for now, I think everyone's just trying to find harmony moving forward, I guess is the best way to put it.
I like that. And with that, do you have anything you'd like to add, Mr. Blue Jays fan, as your team is down 1-0 in the ALCS against the Seattle Mariners? JFR, Jays fan reaction. The floor is yours.
Well, had we recorded this Sunday night after the game, you would have got some fire and brimstone out of me.
fire and brimstone.
Because I was a fired up Jays fan, but I've woken up. The sun has come up on this Monday morning. I'm actually going to the game. I guess this after it's 5:00. Is that an afternoon start, early evening? It's kind of a between periods time. But anyway, I will be in the building for the 5 p.m. first pitch, 5:03. Trey Savage is going to throw that first pitch. And having been at his last start, which was just absolutely electric in game 2 against the Yankees in the ALDS, I'm choosing to wake up today optimistic, hopeful. It's a best 4 out of 7. So the margins aren't quite as stark as they were in the last round. And I'm not going to break apart a team that just beat the Yankees handily. Look, there's no getting around the fact it's a missed opportunity just with Seattle having such a quick turnaround from their own ALDS series, having to fly across the continent, you know, burning through pitchers at, you know, a rate you wouldn't want to if you were drawing it up to start with. And the Jays bats just not finding a way to do what the Jays do best, which is just turn over a lineup, right? Like just keep moving the chain down the line, you know, tough at bats, grinding the pitches. I mean, It was 25 plus pitches in the first inning last night. Springer, homers on the first pitch of the game. I'm like, wow, this is like, they are on it. This is going to be a bad night to be a Mariner. It ended up being a pretty good night to be a Mariner because the Jays could barely get a hit from that point on. So I'm coming at you. I'm not a rage-filled Jays fan. I'm not I'm not under a big cloud today. Let's even the series. Let's win one in Seattle at least and get it back here to Toronto next weekend and get the job done. So Savage is the Oracle. He's going to get it done today.
He's the Oracle. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. We'll be back on Thursday later or any point later this week with a brand new episode. CJ, before
did you know
go,
I'm tempted to buy a Savage jersey?
I'm surprised you haven't bought one yet.
Well, I looked online and they only had the baby blue, and that's just like I'm fine.
You don't like the baby blue?
No.
What?
I mean,
that's a nice color.
Here's the other thing. I'm kind of a stocky guy. Like, I don't know if a baseball jersey is gonna, like, I've never had a baseball jersey. Like, I don't know if I'm actually.
You don't really have jerseys, period.
I don't have a lot. I mean, I have some old NHL jerseys literally from when I was a kid. Like, I have like a Wayne Gretzky Oilers jersey from way, way back. I had a Tony Romo jersey from my Cowboys fandom of like the early 2000s to 2010 period that I would wear every once in a while. It's got like wing sauce on it because I would probably wear it at the kind of place that they serve wings.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I don't wear a lot of jerseys. Sauce? And I also feel like as an adult, I don't know. I kind of feel like a baseball jersey you can maybe get away with. I don't know how you feel about that as an adult.
I think you could get away with it depending on what you wear. What wing sauce would you still have on your Tony Romo jersey?
It's probably just like a medium wing. I can't go too hot because everything.
Right, you're not a spicy.
Everything
man.
comes out of my nose, my eyes. I'm crying. I need Kleenex. Yeah, it's not that I don't like spice. Like, I like the taste of it. It's just what it does to me is not pleasant if you're around other people. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm not sure I'm buying one. If he has like 15 strikeouts today, though, I'm definitely going to do that. If something weird, crazy happens, I feel compelled.
Before we wrap this up, can you give me just for the last time, give me a duh Yankees lose, and then we'll get out of here.
Duh Mariners lose.
That works too. Thanks so much for listening, guys.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.